Season 17 is promising rank changes, and over the last month I spent talking about 3 major flaws ranked had, 2 of which were already covered on the channel. And today, finally, let's be honest, this should be the rank system we should be participating in. And let us hope that Season 17 starts pushing us in that direction. My name is Flame078, the normal gamer, breaking down Apex from the average perspective. And well, it's time to drill this lesson finally into the Apex community. So without further ado, let's get to it. So I approach these sets of videos, this topic, as I would do any software developer task at my job. I ask one question: what is the goal? What am I achieving here? And I actually discussed in a short form video when J Miles brought up in one of his recent videos talking about how ranked should mirror the most competitive version of the game, and then how other popular titles, their ranked versions, does mirror competitive play. Meaning, as you climb the ranks, you should be able to compete against pro level players, and it simulates pro level play. So in short, it should mean that Masters players and pro players, the only real difference is one of them is getting paid for it. So if that's the foundation of a rank, that is the design of it, then what is the rank ladder supposed to do? And what do we need to iron out? Well, what are pros doing in ALGS that we can bring over to ranked? Then how do we transform that into something that is kind of more attainable? And then what do we get from participating in said system? In ALGS, we see a lot of different types of play styles. Nothing's really set in stone. It seems like the meta is constantly changing, though right now there's a strong pull towards the wall hacks, but who knows if that's going to remain in play. From edge play to zone play to really aggressive play. And if you think about it, this does make sense because Apex is a battle royale with RNG at its core. So different players and different metrics of success can happen because the whole goal is to mitigate that RNG. Your kills do get rewarded, but overall placement is what matters in competitive Apex. So how do you design a system that is flexible enough to encompass what I just talked about, but rigged enough to push players and punish players who don't value placement? Listen, we had our answer in Season 13. More specifically, I think Split 2 should be the basis of the rank system. Let's go over some key things. Decreasing KP has to come back, and the way it was implemented in Split 2 was that 12 kills, 12 KP was kind of what you wanted to shoot for, because after that you only got 20% of the potential RP you could get for that KP, which makes sense because that's like 4 squads worth of enemies that you could be being rewarded for fully or close to fully, which is like 1/5 of the lobby. Like, think of this like kind of random scenario that could happen but unlikely, where you land contested like 5 teams and then you do manage to get 12 KP off that first initial fight because everyone landed, 5 teams landed there and whatnot. That's 12 KP right there. But if you die at 15 place still really early on after, then you shouldn't be rewarded for that, because again, the goal is placement. I like where the placement and KP values sit for the most part, but more on that in a second. To me, with the ladder that we have, the best player is the one that can consistently get to top 5 despite going against RNG. That's the goal. That is what competitive means. But it's important to get KP on top of your placement. The best way to think about it is you want to be incentivized to break top 10, because that's when any KP you have acquired before then will skyrocket. Getting to top 10 with no KP should feel scary to the players, because it shows that they are uncomfortable with fighting, or at the very least there's a high risk of you still falling short. It should be risky getting to top 10 and no KP. But at the same time, those comfortable enough to play, say, the end game and say they don't want to fight until that top 5 situation or until the last final rings, they got to be rewarded too, because they're comfortable enough to get that KP at the end. Either way, I think it's a personal choice on how you want to play, but the system is flexible enough where you can either do the 2 extremes, really aggressive or really passive, or somewhere down the middle. But the key thing is, just placement alone is not enough. You have to be able to fight. I also think that division thresholds are fine where they're at. It does feel really good, and each division feels a little bit harder than the previous one, and I kind of like that, so don't touch that. So if that's our basis, what does need to change? Like I said, for the most part, everything's good up until you hit Masters. The higher level play got totally messed up because it lost that relationship between placement and KP. Because they try to mitigate the rising RP thresholds from Season 12, they made it so Master Plus players or Predators could essentially eat 175 RP to just play ranked. In theory, that was like, okay, if that cost is that high, it should slow how much RP they're getting. But it kind of backfired because a win with only 2 KP got you 0, or even a win got you negative still, which, as unlikely as that would be with those levels of lobbies, that's the root of the problem. It devalued placement. So the fix that I would have is to ensure at those levels, once you get to break top 5, top 3, second place, first place, you're negating your entry cost, whatever they modify that to. There's no reason for top placement to not be rewarded in higher place, so we need to bring that back. Would that then bring back the high thresholds from Season 12? Sure, but honestly, I would rather see healthy placements and healthy matches at those levels than care about how high the RP is going up. To make something attainable, or this kind of system more attainable, I think a solution that I'm going to provide is already going to happen in Season 17. Removing the split reset system. It hurts normal players from participating long term, and those that do have the skill but just couldn't put in the time, because not only did you have a harder system in place, you also had a time restriction. It probably demotivated players that do belong in higher ranks. So removing the split system would encourage those players to get in, and the more players that are playing, like I've discussed in previous videos, solves matchmaking, because matchmaking, regardless of how strict or loose the criteria to make fair lobbies is, unless it's completely random, it's always going to look for a certain type of player, and the chances increase to find that player if you have more players to choose from. So the more players that get into platinum means a higher chance of some of those platinum players getting to diamond, and then some of those diamond players getting to masters, therefore creating a higher tier population that should make things easier and smoother for the higher up players to have fair lobbies. But why was the split system introduced to begin with? It was noted that, you know, during these 3-month seasons, usually the last month or so, ranked seemed kind of dead. It was noted when they transitioned to the split system that that was kind of the case, and they wanted people to play ranked throughout the entirety of the season. But I don't think that's necessary anymore, because now we do have a stronger ladder that does promote a healthier, skillful Apex. So now that it's harder and with more time, people are still going to play throughout the season, because even with time in, people who don't belong in higher ranks shouldn't be getting them. And from what I've seen, that seems to be the case looking at the player distributions, because having those huge spikes, say at Division 4 of Platinum and Diamond, also isn't healthy. And the last part of, is this worth it? What would make something like this worth it? Well, a 20-minute match is pretty hefty, and we know that the player base is kind of like ADHD filled, because no one grasps the concept of like sitting still, or doesn't like the idea or comfortable with the idea of having slow moments. But in a 20-minute match like this, where RNG is involved, to make it competitive, you're going to have those moments. But we need to have flexibility, like I've discussed. So as long as you're allowed to combat RNG in your way and you're not restricted to a certain playstyle, I think everyone's gonna have a good time. But the motivation is different for everyone, and like I discussed in my ranked Recolor video, you know, my motivation would be kind of cool, like, all right, how cool cosmetics that you can show off, right? Because the ones that we have currently, then is just not enough. But even if we do smaller tweaks like that, we'll be incentivizing for players to continue playing over and over again. Lastly, to incentivize and to ensure it's worth playing, get solo queue players involved by having solo queue only lobbies, or at the very least, make the entry cost lower, though I would prefer solo queue only lobbies. This would also tie into the motivation factor, which ties into the population, which fixes matchmaking, so it's all kind of encompassing. We need to be promoting healthy and correct competitive behaviors as you climb ranked, but it shouldn't be restrictive. Skilled players should have the option to land hot and gamble, or play super slow, or somewhere in the middle. I feel like Season 13, we did see that. Competitive Apex is about how well you can mitigate RNG and your ability to get high placement. My name is Flame078. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Until next time, adios.